Everyone for joining. So the last session that we had, I thought was really interesting. We had the guys from Turing.com, for those of you who were with us. And Turing.com had set up a couple of years ago, got quite a lot of funding from Silicon Valley, and had managed to attract 800,000 software developers as part of their talent pool that they could tap into. So they'd been located, sourced, if you like, and screened, and then could be available if they could get the enterprise demand. I found that just fascinating. The volume that they had access to, I just found amazing, especially given everything else that's going on in the industry. And today we're going to talk about something completely different, or slightly different, related, but slightly different, because we're going to be thinking about internal talent mobility. And I'll introduce Paul Roberts from Gloat in a second. But I just wanted to talk about a couple of other things as well. Just so parochially, selfishly, just to give you a bit of update on what I'm up to. So you may have seen on LinkedIn that Resource, my company, merged with the Open Assembly. And the Open Assembly are an organization, a community, a consultancy that had formed about 3 years ago out of Harvard University's Innovation Science Lab. And a guy called John Windsor, who's now our chairman, who's the founder of the company, is their executive in residence. And they basically worked together to collect as much data on open talent and crowdsourcing and open innovation as they could to study it with the academics at Harvard. And then to take their learnings and apply them to industry. So they were in business, or are in business, to help enterprise demand grow, to help enterprises to access the open talent economy. And they've done really well and worked with NASA and with GE and with Zurich and with Commonwealth Bank and with a whole host of big organizations. And Resource we've been doing for a year or so in the UK, as you're probably aware, and been doing very, very similar work. And we then started to collaborate on some projects, and we decided to put the two things together. So I'm now running the Open Assembly's consulting business, or their entire business. And John's gone to chairman while he writes a book for Harvard. He's writing a book on the open talent economy, which will be published in February. And so that's super exciting. Been loads going on. Suddenly my life has got incredibly busy, especially as they're based in Colorado. So at 2 p.m. every afternoon, my afternoon is completely blocked till about 9 o'clock. I think Eleanor's going to divorce me if I don't stop working every evening, but it's so hard to find the time. Overlaps with a global business, which I'm not used to, which many of you are, I know. So we've got to get used to that, but that's really good. But the other thing that we've inherited as a result, or I've inherited, is something called the Center for the Transformation of Work. And for those of you who aren't aware of that, and I hadn't really got my head around it, despite being an Open Assembly member, it's a completely separate organization, which is a not-for-profit organization. It's got about 3,000 members now, and it's designed to support freelancers who make a living via, or make some form of income, I should say, via open talent platforms. So they've decided to be freelancers. Or actually, that's the wrong thing to say. They decided to do freelancing, potentially at the same time as they do employment. And some of them have decided to go full-time freelancing, and not to do it maybe in a traditional way where they spend time physically in a organization, but to do it via digital platforms. Now, that's very relatively nascent, despite some of us knowing about it for many years, and some platforms being around for 20 years plus. But it's growing very quickly. And it's growing partly because of the ownership economy, Web 3.0 principles, people wanting to take back control, which is a term I hate because of for obvious political reasons. But people they don't want to be employed necessarily. They don't want to work for any brand, however good the brand is, because they want to work for themselves and pick and choose, travel potentially, the whole sort of cliche, if you like, of if you've got a laptop and an internet connection and a skill, you can work anywhere in the world. But there is a growing cohort of people deciding to work in that way. And the Center for the Transformation of Work is set up to look after them, basically, to work with insurance companies to make sure they've got benefits, or they could have benefits available to them if they decide to pay for them, to make sure that they know about pension contributions and they're able to make that sort of payments and other protections, but also to try to get certainty of demand for them. And the other thing we are lobbying for the Centre for the Transformation of Work is to try to get platforms, external talent platforms, to enable freelancers to own their identity and own the data that they produce as a result of their work on platforms, so that they could take it with them from platform to platform. So if you worked on Upwork and you do loads of work and it's great, when you leave Upwork and you work on freelancer.com or on Talent Alpha, you can't take your credentials, your experience, your testimonials from Upwork and port them with you. You could type it all back in again. But we have a vision for enabling freelancers to own their data and to take it from platform to platform. And we are setting that up on blockchain, and it's really super exciting. So we're trying to set it up as a decentralized autonomous organization, which is an episode, if you like, of this, a roundtable in itself. But we're also setting it up on blockchain principles so that the community can be rewarded for tokens if they are doing something to achieve the objective of the Centre for the Transformation of Work. So we spent quite a lot of time on that yesterday. We're designing the smart contract. It's a way of rewarding people to help achieve our vision. So that's super exciting, and I think that will get much, much bigger. There's lots of interest. But it's a separate organisation to Open Assembly, and I'm involved in it, but it sort of runs itself. The other thing I wanted to say, I don't know whether the guys have seen this in the news, only this morning I saw that the LinkedIn marketplace that everyone's been talking about for about a year is about to be launched. And I think that's going to be very exciting, because an organization the size of LinkedIn, with the number of LinkedIn members, if they're now going into the open talent economy, so effectively at a very simple level, it would enable, Mark Brooks Lewis, who I can see now in the middle of my screen, to display his capabilities on LinkedIn, and effectively somebody else to be able to say, oh, Mark, can I buy a bit of your time, please? At its very, very highest macro level, that's the concept. So suddenly got however many million people, hundreds of million people who are on LinkedIn, have the capability or the potential to provide services. Super interesting concept. It's taken a long time to get to market, and it's about to be launched, according to staffing industry analysts and others that I subscribe to. I saw in the news this morning. So I think that's really, really interesting. So, however, that's not what we're here to talk about. So the idea of this, of course, this forum is that every month we talk about something related to open talent and open innovation, and the way it's disrupting the outsourcing industry. Oh, and can I say one more thing before I introduce Paul? This week we had a bit of a breakthrough, because we've been supporting an outsourcing service provider in quite a big way to put together an open talent strategy to provide freelance talent to support their clients. Right, so you imagine a big outsourcing service provider, like every other outsourcing service provider, really struggling to find people. And so we've introduced them to the open talent concept. We've set up a centre of excellence. We've done the security and compliance and all that sort of stuff. So they've got the capability to find talent, and we've done 4 pilots, and it's gone really well. They've now taken that to one of their clients. Their client happened to say, we're having a nightmare finding talent too, and they're a massive global organization. And so this company have said, oh, we just fixed it internally. We could help you fix it. Anyway, long story short, as a result, this outsourcing service provider have now taken responsibility for $1 billion worth of spend that their client is struggling with in terms of contingent labor and freelance labor and the talent challenge, putting their arms around it and providing a completely new service that they didn't exist before. So I think we might start to see outsourcers, who are typically ITO or BPO providers, start managing the talent challenge on behalf of their clients. And to be honest with you, it's not something I'd thought about, but it's serendipitously something that I think will come about. So as we help outsourcing service providers with their talent challenge, they then enables them to help their clients with their talent challenge and have a whole new set of services. Quite exciting, actually, not something I'd thought about from an outsourcing perspective. However, so I want to introduce Paul now. So with every conversation we've had so far, the last 6 times we've done this, has been about external talent and the gig economy and freelancers. And it's sort of related to this, but one of the things that we talk about in the book that John Windsor's writing and the playbook that we've published is to start internally first. If you have a talent challenge, which most organizations right now, regardless of discipline, are having right now, I think we've got a bit of an existential crisis in the world of talent, whether it's in retail or hospitality or digital technology. But the first thing you should do is to look internally. And certainly organizations I've run in the past, we have a spreadsheet to try and match supply and demand and think about, oh, what do our consultants' skills, what do they have? How can we match their skills with the right opportunity? And I'm sure lots of organizations still work in that way, but they don't have to work in that way because digital technology and software enables us to match people on the fly with supply and demand, and to load balance in, with capacity in New York with requirements in London. And there are a growing number of internal talent platforms that enable that type of mobility. And one of them is Gloat. Probably the leading one, I think, is Gloat, but we'll hear from Paul. And we are lucky to have Paul Roberts from Gloat with us today. So, Paul, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Sorry I've waffled on for the first 13 minutes of this roundtable, but I do that every month.
So, that's okay.
Could you just, I think, first of all, we'd just be interested to learn a little bit about you, and then I'll ask you a little bit about Gloat. And guys, what I want to do is to ask Paul 3 or 4 questions and then open it up to you guys, because I think you'll have loads of questions. So let's make this as interactive as possible. But yeah, Paul, first of all, tell us a little about yourself.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for letting me join. My name is Paul Roberts. I head up the EMEA organization for Gloat. I have been in Gloat for just over 8 months now. Prior to that, 20 plus years in the technology industry at various organizations, some big, some small. I think the most relevant one in terms of where I am now is SuccessFactors. For those of you who understand or know about SuccessFactors, essentially an HCM provider now. I spent nearly 8 years there, including acquisition into SAP, when SAP acquired SuccessFactors in 2012. So been leading teams in the UK, across Europe for quite a long time, and excited to be here and talk a little bit about what Gloat does without being too much unashamedly plugging Gloat. But Barry, do you want to ask me some questions, or do you want me to maybe give some?
You were going to say, I'll tell you a bit about Gloat without gloating. I thought you were about to say
no. I'll try and build a picture that leads very, very naturally to what Gloat does. But if you have questions, Barry, go ahead. Otherwise, I can give some background if you want.
Yeah, I mean, there may be some people on the call who've never heard of Gloat, so it'd be really useful just to explain a little bit about it, but also the history. I don't know actually how long Gloat has been around and how quickly they've grown. So if you could give us a little bit of background on that, I think that would be really useful.
Yeah, let me paint a picture first, if I may. It's interesting, some of the things that you were saying about the talent economy, where the world is today, shortages of labor in lots of different industries. So, we've been around for 6 years, and I think growing steadily, up to the pandemic beginning, with some very big brands as customers originally, like Unilever, like Schneider Electric, like PepsiCo. And then we found, as the pandemic began, with everyone, it was all sort of no one knew what was going to go on. People worried about their jobs, and could we actually continue in the vein that we were and show the growth that we had? And we found actually it only accelerated the need and desire for a talent marketplace. And talent marketplace is something I'll come back to. So you think about where we are now. The pandemic for a lot of people made them reassess, and there is a really good article. I can't remember who wrote it, but it's called The Great Reassessment. People have thought about work-life balance, purpose, what they want to achieve in their lives, family, etc. It could be other things. So, do I want to continue what I'm doing from a work perspective? Is it giving me what I really want out of work and out of life in general? To the point now, I think for that first 6 months or so, maybe a little bit longer, it was about, I just want to survive in my role. A lot of uncertainty as time has gone by, and certainly this year we've found more and more people actually taking the choice to want to go and do something else. And in fact, I've heard this 4 or 5 times very, very recently. There are people that are just choosing to leave their jobs and not have another job to go to. And they're leaving simply because they can't achieve what they want to achieve.
Yeah.
So we have this dynamic where there's a lot of people leaving jobs. There's a big open job market out there that companies are struggling to fill jobs for varying reasons. And this is all combining to, you call it the Great Resignation, the Great Reassessment, the turnover tsunami, whatever you want to call it. We firmly believe, and there's lots of commentary on this as well, one of the biggest reasons people leave their jobs, whether it was prior to the pandemic, during the pandemic, and now as we're still coming out of it, is because they cannot see opportunity, or they don't believe they can gain experiences and grow and develop. This concept of the traditional business being very hierarchical, and the way that you move in a business is only upwards and it's only career advancement. I think now more and more companies are realizing that is not the way to go. And again, there was a very good article only from last week, I think it was, or even the week before, in Forbes by someone called Dan Pontefract. And he labeled this the horizontal ignition. So in other words, we should be helping our people gain experiences through taking on part-time or gigs or secondments or shadowing, mentoring, those sorts of concepts, because that will help them achieve what they want to achieve, much more so than putting them on, a succession plan or in a career path, etc. Now, those things will still exist in businesses, and I'm sure those that are in the corporate world, you will have those things, and those things are required. But for the vast majority of people in a business, that they actually want to be able to grow and develop. So what do we do? That was background I just wanted to share, because it leads very nicely to what is Gloat and what do we do? So Gloat is an open talent marketplace focused for the internal movement of people. So we do give the individual empowerment to take control of their career journeys and career experiences by using the marketplace to find opportunities for them that suit them, that give them experiential learning, that help them develop, and at the same time, from a business's perspective, allows the businesses to find people with the right skills and put them into the right types of projects or roles or jobs that helps the business achieve right now, today. So an example for you to bring this to life, or a couple of examples maybe. So one is with Unilever. Traditionally, for them to launch new products, it might take them 3 months just to mobilize a group of people. And then they've got to go through ideation, testing, et cetera, et cetera. We helped them launch a brand new ice cream in Turkey in 3 months. So that is actually get product to market within 3 months, which has led to increased sales, increased revenue, et cetera. And they did that because they were able to find people cross functional, cross business unit, cross geography, who had the right skills to come in and really have this mobilization, ideation, and creation of a new product at speed. So we can.
So just on that simply. So presumably prior to that, or prior to having Gloat's capability, they would have just looked at the people that they had available to them before, who had those job roles of whatever ice cream flavor designer. And if those people were busy, then they wouldn't have been able to focus on launching this new ice cream in Turkey. But because they've got this talent marketplace, they can see the skills that the entire organization has got, and then they can tap into those skills to get things done more quickly.
Correct. They would have been limited largely to who do we have available in Turkey, or maybe in a business unit, versus breaking down silos, giving visibility across the entire organization, not only finding people, but people holding their hands up to be part of something as well. And we've got lots of stories of people that go on to do experiential project work. So someone from finance going into HR, for a 2-month period of time on a project, learning skills, always wanted to be in HR. 6 months after they finished, there's a full-time role that comes up. They have gained the skills, they are able to go into that role full-time. So, we're able to, with the talent marketplace, give people an opportunity to grow, develop, take more ownership of their experiences, and give the company the ability to actually improve the way that they work, do important projects more quickly, be agile in the way that they work. And the benefits that we see is, retention is one key one. Keeping people in your business. If you lose people, it costs a lot of money. We all know that. Not only from having to rehire them, but actually the loss of productivity. Engagement goes up, and with engagement, you get greater productivity. And one of the things we do measure is around a concept called unlocked hours. So unlocked hours of productivity is where someone has an hour or 2 hours that they can spend and want to spend learning new things, and you can tap into that their skill set to put them onto projects or gigs that helps them and helps the company. So we see massive savings and productivity gains from that. There's engagement. There's the ability to move people around, across regions. Breaking down silos. There's D&I considerations as well. So that's what we do. It's the marketplace. It's about matching people. There's a big element of AI behind it that is sort of the engine that does that matching, which was a key part of our IP. So let me pause there, Barry, and see what questions are and what conversation that might lead to with people.
Yeah, no worries. I think it's super interesting and quite simple, right? I mean, like I often say, simply brilliant, brilliantly simple. But it's quite a simple concept. But I think you talked about, it's great for the individual. It's great for people because it gives them the opportunity to learn new skills and to develop their career. It's also great for the company, right? To be able to sweat the asset. I mean, people is the biggest cost of just about most organizations, not all. And so being able to use them differently and more creatively also makes sense. I was running a training course last week, and there was a lady there who runs a hotel chain, and it made me think of this because she basically said, we've got, I don't know, 100 different hotels. And she said, when we're really struggling to find staff, because no one wants to work in the hospitality industry. So we thought, right, we'll be really clever. We've got one person who, let's say, might be who works behind the bar. We're actually going to say, right, for 2 hours, you can do some room cleaning, because we don't need you in the bar, but we're employing you. And we'll pay you the same. And then, lunch times, you can work in the kitchen, I'm making this up, or be, a waiter or waitress. And then in the evening, you can go back to your bar job. So you can do 3 different things, learn new skills. And she said, we tried this, like, globally, this was our plan. They had a brand name for it, in my view. She said the systems in our hotel were just made it impossible because we have one system for the bar staff, we have another system for cleaners, we have another system. So she said just internally, it was just impossible for us to make it work. And it made me think of, your talent marketplace. That was just one thing that popped into my head. But the thing that I find I'd really like to dig into a little bit is how does it work from the budgeting and commercial perspective? So if you think this, you're employing somebody as an accountant, and they're being paid a salary, and then they leave their salaried accounting position to go and do some stuff in whatever, in HR or in marketing. How do the funds get transferred? How do cost centers? I can imagine it must be really, really complicated. How does that all work?
Yeah, it's a good point because the technology itself is an enabler. With most technology, that is the case. There's a lot of things that go around it, and in this case, fundamentally, we are asking companies to change the way that they work and think about the way that they work, which does lead to a lot of change management considerations. And part of that is around compensation, around policies in terms of, well, how many hours per week would we want to allow someone? But also things like, how long should you be in our business before we allow you to go and do something else? There's the role of the line manager and, having them on board in not thinking, well, I'm losing someone, therefore I don't want them to be part of this. but actually encouraging people to go and learn new things, because actually they will benefit as well by finding people they can bring into their own part of their organization to do some work that they need to have done on a project basis. So it comes down to each individual company. There's no hard and fast rules, I don't think. And it'd be wrong for me to try and sort of explain what a Unilever is doing versus a Schneider, but all of those things absolutely have to be considered. And it's something we learned very early on, and actually created a change in enablement function to manage that with someone that came out of a big four consulting firm. So it is key. A really good example, just to try and give some examples and tell some stories here. Schneider Electric, when we first started with them, they had a policy that said, you have to be in the business for more than 2 years before we can allow you to think about moving around internally. And very quickly they realized that was going to be prohibitive to try and achieve what they wanted to achieve. So, and they started, their start point was they were losing people, very highly skilled people in their industry, very hard to replace them and costly to replace them. 50% of the people that were leaving were saying it's because we cannot see career opportunity and growth and development opportunities. So that was the problem they were trying to solve. By using Gloat, they've actually, not stated publicly necessarily, and I won't give an exact number, but it's in the millions of euros savings in using Gloat. And they changed that policy from 2 years very quickly to 1 year, to very quickly, I think it was within 6 months, to 0. If you can start a role today, and if you want, you can go off and do gig work and project work an hour a week. So they have policies around that, so that it wasn't open-ended. And they'll have policies around how they do the compensation. So hopefully that helps. It doesn't quite answer the question, I know, but hopefully it helps give people understanding of, yes, there is more to the technology. You have to look at the change, and we do help with that as well.
And guys, please put your hand up or just ask questions if you want to, if you as you have them. I think, Paul, it's like any large scale process and technology change, whether you're putting in Oracle or SAP or PeopleSoft or Gloat, right? It's a partly it's process change and people change, and partly it's technology. The technology is the simple bit, right? It's getting people to actually think differently and use it. And I suppose working remotely or predominantly remotely from a mindset perspective makes it easier to adopt this new way of thinking, right? But where if you were all sitting in the same office, commuting in every day, it'd be much harder, I think, from a human, perspective to say, oh, well, that person's going off to do 2 days somewhere else. Well, where are they? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, potentially. I think added to that, we are all going into hybrid working of some sort, as we come out of the pandemic. Some companies may choose 3 days a week in an office, 2 days at home, or vice versa. Some companies may actually allow even more flexibility than that. So when you can't, back to that traditional hierarchical structure, and it's largely who in a network that allows you to get on and move up this ladder. How do you achieve what you want to achieve then, and progression? And progression, again, it's not necessarily going up. Progression is learning new things, experiential learning, development. So you go across, you can go down. It's finding those things. So I think that the hybrid working, what we can offer allows for much greater ability to achieve that development piece. Back to the change for us, one of the things we try and do is land something quickly. So in SAP and Oracle, putting in a large HCM program or HRIS, takes a number of years. I know that because I was at SuccessFactors, as I said. We see that we can land something within 3 months, maybe 4 months. And we do that because we choose an audience that we see has more of a burning issue and has more demand and more pull to work in this way. So IT groups are a good example. IT, if you think about skills in IT, the half-life for skill is maybe 18 months. It's maybe even less than that now. So they have to learn new things all the time to stay relevant. You think about a lot of companies, most companies these days, digital experience or digital skills is becoming more and more relevant. No matter what industry you are in, so finding people with those skills or being able to develop those skills. So you take car companies, right? They're moving from traditional combustion engine to all of them have to go fully electric at some point in the next, say, 10, 15, 20 years, if not sooner. Tobacco companies for a number of years now have been moving more and more towards being device and chemical companies because less than people are smoking. So it's those sort of things that we're helping trying to facilitate. You find a group that will launch early, get success with them, show value with them, and then you start to grow to the wider population. And ultimately, we are going to be used by an entire population in a business.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a question about training, but let me come to Mark's question. So yeah, Mark, how important is the classification of skills, and how do you agree the exact terminology used? I don't need to read them, Mark, by the way. You can just ask them yourself if you like.
Sorry, I wasn't sure about the approach this morning. A tiny bit of background, Paul. We've been talking in our company to similar organisations as yourself, nowhere near where you are, of course. So congrats on your progress so far. And they all say the same thing. Senior HR leaders talking about skills, but not really understanding how to unlock that within an organization compared with the terminology they've always used around competency frameworks, around career models, around skills being part of a bigger thing, which also has knowledge, experience, etc. And it's tied to the reward framework. So I think the HR guys we're talking to get it. They know they want to move in a direction, but they're having to unpick effectively everything to unpick a little bit of it to make it work. So you talking about skills, how do you define what that classification is for yourself, and how does that apply to other organizations of varying different views of the same thing?
Yeah. And Mark, if you don't mind me asking, which company are you from?
So we've built an open talent marketplace specifically at HR and HR tech in the last 3 or 4 months ourselves. So
okay,
a similar world, but I've run HR transformations with Oracle, SAP, etc. before, so I know exactly where you're coming from and the kind of interesting parts of that.
Yeah. So to your question, then, we see most companies still are in what I say a traditional mindset around skills frameworks, job architectures, competencies, that sort of thing. And, it takes time to build those things up. And actually, as soon as you're done, you're never done because they continually change. So you have to maintain them and update them. From our perspective, our AI, and I won't try and explain the detail of this, A, because I'm not qualified to, and B, because it would take us easily the next 25 minutes to get into it and more. But our AI compensates for all of that, because if you think about how AI works, when we first started, we had a limited set of data. As we've been going for 6 years now, we have a much broader set of data, both from our customers, which we anonymize, and we learn each time someone does something on the platform, we learn about it, and the model and the algorithm changes and updates. But also external data and benchmark data that we've brought in and we continue to bring in. So we call it an evolving ontology. Now, if a company has a skills framework or they have job architectures, that sort of thing, we can utilize those, but we actually don't need them to begin with or on an ongoing basis. So it becomes a choice as to, if you have something, we'll utilize it. If you don't, we can still get you up and running. We still recognize that we have to identify skills and we have to identify competencies, but the AI takes care of that because of all the learning that it's done in the last 6 years and continues to do as we move forward. And the more data we bring into it, the better it becomes. So, we do talk to companies about this all the time. And we say, whatever you have, we can use. If you don't have anything, that's fine. You don't have to wait to have it 100% done and accurate because that's going to take time. And then, even then, as I say, you're going to have to continue to update it and maintain it. So hopefully that's answered the question to some degree. Really the AI is a key piece of our IP and why we've been so successful with lots of big brand names around the world.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Paul, can I ask a question about the data? Do you think you've got 6 years of data where you will be able to see that somebody who was a whatever C++ developer has become a Java developer, and you can see those pathways. So you can presumably then start to look at patterns and start to do some predictive analytics for organizations to say people in these departments are likely to go on these career pathways, and be able to help them to prepare the skills and training required to transform those organizations. Is that part of your offering?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a career planning piece within the platform, and it offers kind of 3 different pathways actually. So one is a traditional pathway, exactly what you just said, Barry. You know, you've got these skills. Typically, people with those skills go on to do these things. Here's a pathway to being a project manager or a leader of a team within an IT function, whatever it might be. And these are the things that you would need to do. And here's some mentors you can go and talk to. Then there is an opportunity for the individual themselves to say, well, actually, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go and do this, right? So how do we plot your pathway to where you want to be? And again, so we connect to learning systems, LXPs, what learning can you go and do? Yeah. We can do experiential things. So what gigs or projects do we have you can go and do? What mentors do we have, etc. So there's that sort of pathway as well. And then the third one is sort of a combination of the two. So yes, that is definitely part of the platform, and we learn more and more. And insights, because you're talking about insights there, it's something we're building more and more of now in the way that we try and both harmonize skills and look at job architectures, take in more and more external benchmark data from the likes of, say, a Mercer, a Burning Glass, those sorts of companies. And actually, I'll use the word predictive, but I want to be careful with that. Actually start to give more insight into the skills of the future. Let me put it that way. And show where your gaps are. Some areas will have big gaps, some areas smaller gaps. But where you have those gaps, you've got to go and find people and train them, and develop them and reskill them, upskill them, so that your business, because most businesses will continue to evolve and change. Pandemics or events like a pandemic, just reminds us all and accelerates the need to change for a lot of companies. The change is inevitable. So how can we continue to keep ahead of that and be agile in the way that we work? And our labor markets will be a finite pool of talent, and often not the right talent. So therefore, let's develop our own talent internally first of all and keep them in the business.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. For about 100 years, I've been working in the outsourcing world, and one of the things that I've been banging on about for most of that time is that in order to make outsourcing work, the buying organisation needs to develop certain competencies. They need to be able to work with external suppliers. Sadly, I think an awful lot of organisations really find it difficult to get that they need this core competency really, because it's become so important, particularly for big organisations. And so my question is that with this particular way of working, using open talent platforms, is there a core competency, a group of competencies that a buying organisation needs to develop? And if so, what sort of things might they be? And the final bit of the question is, do you see that organisations are embracing that? They're looking to try and develop this capability to make it work.
So when you say a buying organisation, maybe just clarify that for me, because you talk about outsourcing. So can you just clarify what you mean by buying organisation?
Yeah, so I think in this context, it's an organisation that chooses to make use of open talent platforms. Mm-hmm. So they would come to you and say, okay, we want to use your services. And as you've been explaining, it means that we have to think about how we use resources in very different ways. So, the notion of hierarchies and all those sorts of things, potentially people being able to work for us and for other people, perhaps, you know, all of those sorts of things. It means a very different, I think there's a different culture that needs to be established. And I think in my experience of organizational outsourcing, which I recognize, you know, they're not the same as we're talking about here, but it requires organizations to get their heads around the fact that they're now trying to manage an ecosystem.
Yeah. Do you remember? Can I take a stab at that, Paul?
Yeah,
because I think it's a mixture of sort of open talent and internal mobility here. So I think, Chris, you're absolutely right. In my experience, organizations aren't often prepared or ready for the different dynamic, the different nature that's required to manage a third-party supplier in the same way that they were managing internally, or manage one third-party supplier in a different way to managing another third-party supplier. So I think and I think it's a really good segue into another question I have, which is around the outsourcing service providers or clients and how they might use internal mobility platforms. But I think if the client, the buyer of the outsourcing service, had Gloat, they'd be able to identify the capabilities required for, let's sort of, vendor management or transition management. And there would be, I imagine, some employees already in that function, but they'd be able to see the other skills that would be required to add to that function because they need additional scale. And they might be in other job roles right now, but they could lend a hand or transition across or develop their skills so that they could become part of that vendor management function to manage the new outsourced supplier. So in my simple brain, it says, right, we've got a big transaction. We're about to bring in IBM. We've got a very limited capability because we haven't been working with IBM before. Let's have a look on Gloat. We'll have a look at all the capabilities we've got across the entire organization and see whether we've got additional people with the right skills who could come and support our vendor management function. That's in my really simple brain. But actually then you'd also, I imagine, look to bolster that capability externally as well. And that might be where open talent platforms come in, or you might be just looking to recruit new people. Does that make sense? I don't know whether I've answered that question very well.
Yeah, it makes sense. It sounds to me that you're suggesting that if we don't have those particular competencies, those particular set of competencies in-house to make this thing work, then we go out and buy those in.
No, I was saying basically, if you don't have the competencies in-house, if you had Gloat, an internal talent platform across your 100,000 employees, you could see at the click of a button where those other capabilities exist within your internal employee base. And therefore, you could suggest that John Smith over there, who's currently working in marketing, would be a very good fit because he has those competencies and capabilities to work in vendor management. And so therefore, you could suggest there might be an opportunity for John to come join the vendor management team. So I'm saying sweat your internal employee asset, which you can only do if you've got an internal talent marketplace, because otherwise you just don't know what capabilities John's got in marketing. Yeah. So I think it just gives you visibility, right, Paul? I mean, that's that you wouldn't have before.
And I think you've summarised that pretty well, Barry, because we are focused internal. In the future we're looking at doing some other things as well, but it is trying to find break down silos, give greater visibility for everyone in an organisation to opportunity. Where they want to develop themselves and the business needs people in certain places at certain times to help move the business forward. So, again, I use the digital concept, and in terms of digital skills, they are so sought after by lots and lots of companies in lots of different industries now, because everyone is going that way, and they are very expensive. You take, let's consider Just Eat as an example. Right? Just Eat is not a delivery company. Just Eat is a technology company. So a lot of the requirements in terms of skills and roles that they have are for people that are technology focused, engineering, developers, that sort of thing. Guess what? There's loads of other companies in the same category as well, right? They are seen as technology companies. And so that pool of talent is very limited. Can they find within their delivery network, right, people that ride the bikes, drive the scooters, etc., how many of those are maybe students that do something on a part-time basis but are doing maybe a computer science degree or something similar to that? How many are people that have come in from other countries in Europe as immigrants and have a qualification and a skill, but are not recognized for that and therefore are doing this job? How many of them may have actually taken the job because through the pandemic they either got furloughed or were made redundant and they needed to work and they have some other skills, right? It's that sort of thing. Can you identify throughout your entire organization where skills exist, despite what people are doing in your business today, to help you really drive your business forward? So hopefully using Just Eat as an example, it's a bit of an extreme one, but I think a very good one about getting that broader visibility into your entire workforce.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Paul. Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. Yeah, hi, Paul. Thanks. Very, very interesting. I'd spoken briefly to Jeff Schwartz through the Open Assembly, just at a very high level, but very interesting. And as Barry knows, the concept of open talent externally, I think, is well understood. Even when you explain it to colleagues in organisations, and I think internal marketplaces is probably the concept again is understood, and probably people would say they already have certain systems around, but I think it all exists in the analog environment and not in the digital environment. A couple of questions really around, I think you may have hit on it already, the recruitment. I guess the companies need to identify those people who are looking to do something, maybe before thinking of leaving the company or not being able to attain their goals. Do you look to actively recruit a population of people that then get onto the platform? Is that the way you've seen it work best? I guess the second point, in the services type business, you're going to need to free up some time from people who are billing full time onto a client, and there's not enough people to do that work. You're kind of asking people to spend less time building on the client. Are we looking at a 4-day week or something and having a day for them to free up to go and work on other things? I think there's some other things there that will be. I'm just trying to think of the obvious questions and pushback that you're going to get in organisations when you try and introduce such ideas.
Yeah, and as said, one of the big things for us was very early on recognizing the whole change in enablement piece and putting effort into that and building a function around that from our perspective and toolkits and methodologies. And one of the key pieces there to your first question is finding that initial launch population, which again could be a function, could be a geography, could be a business unit, but it's a group of depending on the size of a business, somewhere between maybe 3 and 10,000, maybe even 15,000 at the top end. Again, examples being an IT function, because there is a lot of pull and requirement from an IT function to learn new things and develop new skills. So it's finding that right group that has the requirement and the demand and really can drive an outcome, and it's getting them up and running as quickly as possible. Getting people onto our platform, by the way, doesn't take long. You can upload a CV, you can upload a LinkedIn profile, you can upload from an existing HRS, it could be a flat file of some sort. So getting people onto the platform and having a profile that is complete enough that allows the AI to understand the skills, not only in what they're doing today, but what they've done previously, the roles they've had today, previously, all these sorts of things, and be able to offer them opportunities immediately. That's part of our value proposition. We can do it very, very quickly. And on the other side, clearly, you need to have the opportunities there. So as a company, part of the mindset piece is making sure you are able to offer not just full-time roles, because we think full-time roles probably don't bring as much value, immediate value. But if you can offer part-time, project-based, gig-based, then mentorships as well, those things can happen very, very quickly, and that's where we see quick value. So hopefully that answers the first question for you, Steve.
Yes, thank you, Paul. Yeah.
And then, sorry, I've forgotten what the second
Now, the
question
second one
was.
was really, I guess it's really more from the point of view of where a business, a services business is requiring people to work 5
Yes.
days a week delivering services to a client. You know, giving them other opportunities for them to stay within the organisation. I get all of that, and that's really good. But I guess it kind of creates a bigger problem in the work they're doing for clients because they have less time.
Look, I mean, in service company, and we've talked to a number of them. Clearly, the emphasis is on having people, billable people, out in the field being billed, and because that's their revenue stream. How we've talked to them though is about they struggle often to actually be able to resource projects because they can't find people with the right skills.
Yeah.
So they're kind of giving themselves a problem ongoing if they can't develop their people, because they can't even bid for or participate in new project work because they can't resource them.
Yeah.
So, you know, our conversation with them is, you know, look to how you can see what skills people have. Even if someone's not in a billable role now, could you find people in your business that have the skills to be in a billable role, and therefore actually help you take on more work? So I get what you're saying, you know, about taking people away from billable work. But I think most of those companies also recognize there has to be an amount of time for ongoing training, development, and learning anyway. Otherwise, you get to a problem where you just can't resource projects.
I think there's also imagine, Steve, because this could be a nirvana for just brilliant for a Cognizant and you know I just saw your quarterly results, brilliant, well done, you guys are up again. But you know, with hundreds of thousands of employees, if you had a gloat across the entire place, you could match supply and demand. However, one of the big challenges will be if I'm running financial services, I don't want those guys from manufacturing nicking my best Java developers, because I want them in my own little fiefdom, right? So of that, I can imagine all sorts of cultural implications of that within organizations. But before we go there, if we go there, Bryn, your hand's up.
Yeah, it is. I just wanted to respond a little bit to Stephen's comment about how do you find the headroom to get this moving? You know, what sort of friction does the internal marketplace create, and how can you create the space and time to do it? We've just surfaced a bit of research, Stephen, that's showing that about a third of people's time is spent doing what they're actually hired to do. About a third of people's time is spent doing stuff associated with the overhead of being in a business, and a third of it's spent doing something else, which, you know, we don't really understand. So I think there's plenty of capacity if you can harness the energy that's just being lost out of the system, that could be repurposed and focused not just on the immediate reskilling, but also, you know, accommodating the space and time that's required to set up the marketplace dynamic. We don't know yet how much that's playing through into the sort of billable role, you know, leveraged resource model that you guys would operate on the client side, but it'd be interesting to extend the research into that. I don't think it'd be a million miles away from my experience, to be honest, but I think there's plenty of capacity. It's just a question of purposing it and focusing it.
Yeah. Can I just ask, I know we've only got 5 minutes left, but I'm really interested in the crossover between internal mobility and external mobility. And I think the ideal scenario for a company would be able to have, you know, a single pane of glass over their internal capabilities, but also what's in the external marketplace available on a flexible freelance way to be able to support a challenge. You don't really care, basically, in an ideal world, whether they're an internal employee or whether they're an external contractor via a platform. If they've got the skills to do the job, then we just want them, right? And so I think we'll see more ecosystem thinking. Do you see, are you guys thinking about internal and external? Is it an obvious step to do internal first, move to external, or organizations doing both? What's happening in your world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, where I've got to be careful what I say, because I'm not too sure exactly who's on the call and what companies they're from, but yeah, we're certainly thinking more holistically around the entire talent pool. I'll put it that way, with a focus very much, as you said, Barry, around internal first. because I know, majority of people here in the conversation has been about open talent marketplaces or open talent externally. The reason Unilever came to us in the first place was because they were paying way too much money, they felt, to external contractors, where they believed they could, utilize, project gig-based working and their internal workforce to reduce that cost significantly, which is what they did. Now, having said that, there's always going to be a place for external because you won't find, all the time the right people, the right skills right now. So yes, we are moving in that direction to have a holistic view across everything, with internal being, the first focal point. But if you can't find and develop talent internally, then even things like alumni, right? Alumni become very, very interesting. And how do you retain knowledge of what they've continued to do, and therefore can tap into that, etc. So it is something that we, as you know, Barry, we're thinking about, and we'll have some things on that, relatively soon.
Yeah, brilliant. We are seeing more. Bryn and I are working on two opportunities where like a company who has a good brand want to set up a marketplace so they can offer their internal capabilities to the market on a sort of gig basis, and then they can access expertise to come into their own organization. And so they're basically wanting a talent exchange, so they can do both. It's like it's not a swap shop, but it's a, how can we provide our services to others on a freelance basis, effectively on a flexible basis, and then how can we consume it? And I think that sort of, I can see how Gloat could be used for one, but then you might look to someone else for another. And so therefore, if you can combine the two, I think that's incredibly powerful. Bryn, did you have your hand up for a final question, or have you left it up and your arms aching?
That's just a late withdrawal from the previous.
You can put your hand down. You can put your arm down now, so it stops aching. So we're out of time. That was a really, really interesting discussion, Paul. Thank you so much. I'm sure for a lot of the guys, it was sort of relatively new, or Gloat might be new to them. The concept's probably not new to anyone, but we've all been doing it on spreadsheets. So thank you so much for bringing that to life for us. It's great to see Gloat. I mean, I'm reading about Gloat all the time now. It's great to see you guys doing so well. If you haven't looked at their website or looked at some of the videos, there's an amazing thing from the Unilever head of future of work. What they've achieved is incredible. Schneider is the other really, really good case study. I'm sure there's loads of others, so do check them out. But yeah, Paul, thank you very much indeed on behalf of the GSA.
No problem at all, and thank you for having me. And if people want to get in touch, more than happy, Barry. If you want to share my email address, more than happy to have conversations after this. So, but thank you for your time, and thank you for listening.
No worries, and thanks, guys. I'll see you in a month or so. We'll try and get LinkedIn on then to talk about their big new marketplace. So,
thanks everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.